Before we begin, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Let me ask you a question. If you are a Christian parent with small children and a registered sex offender moves in next door to you, are you going to make judgments about that person? Or will you follow the teachings of many who say that you cannot judge that person because Matthew 7:1 reads, "Judge not that ye be not judged"? For whatever reason, many cling to their contention that we cannot judge others, but if that were true, then why would the Apostle Paul have written in Romans 16:17, "Now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them"? Which begs the question, how are we to mark others and avoid them without first making certain judgments about them? Along with that, 1 Corinthians 5:11 reads, "But now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner, with such a one do not eat." Again, how are we supposed to avoid the relationship with others to the point of not even eating with them without first making certain judgments concerning them? The reconciliation to this paradox lies in the fact that Matthew 7:1 has been interpreted out of context, as that verse must be interpreted in the light of the chapter as a whole in order to discern that we must not judge others in the spirit of hypocrisy, meaning that we can neither judge nor condemn others for those things that we also do, being one reason why John 7:24 reads, "Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment." Notice that this verse specifically tells us to judge the reasoning of others, or perhaps better reworded for today's modern English, judge not what others do, but judge why they do it. Being contrary to those Jewish people who had judged Jesus as being a glutton and drunkard because he ate and drank with undesirables, through which Jesus was labeled as the friend of tax collectors and sinners, without seeking to first discover the reasons for why Jesus ate and drank with them, being his attempt to lead them into eternal salvation. In fact, that very same attitude is what caused the disciples to form the very first denomination in Luke 9:49, which reads, "And John answered and said, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and we forbade him, because he followeth not with us." Notice that the disciples did not care that that man had been operating in the gifts of the Spirit by which to cast out devils, nor did they ever bother to discover his reasonings for casting out devils either, but rather they simply condemned that man for not following after them. All of which I mention because many in the church today are quick to condemn others through their ignorance of proper biblical interpretation, as many believers like to point out the things that others cannot do, as opposed to what they can do. After all, it is common knowledge that most Christian circles condemn such things as drinking, smoking, gambling, fornication, and so on, most of which is merely dogma that has been passed down through the ages, when in reality the Bible actually says something a bit different. For instance, Ephesians 5:18 reads, "And be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess, but be filled with the Spirit." Notice that Paul did not tell us not to drink wine, but rather he said not to drink wine to excess, which is the sin of drunkenness. You see, drinking wine is not a sin. However, drunkenness is a sin. In conjunction with that, the Apostle Paul also wrote in 1 Corinthians 6:12, "All things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any." First of all, notice that the Apostle Paul did not list any disclaimers, such as alcohol and tobacco, when he said that all things were lawful unto him, but rather he said that he would not be brought under the power of any of them, being a type of compulsion or addiction. In other words, through the use of moderation and responsible behavior, the Apostle Paul could do whatever he wanted as long as he did not cross over the line into excessive behaviors. Meaning, in moderation, Paul could eat anything he wanted as long as he did not cross over the line into gluttony, which is the sin of excessive eating. In moderation, Paul could drink anything he wanted. However, he could not cross over the line into drunkenness, which is the sin of excessive drinking. In the confines of marriage, Paul could have sex, which is not sinful, but he could not cross over the line into either premarital or extramarital sex, both of which are sinful. Most importantly, we can use drugs for medicinal purposes while under a doctor's supervision, which is not sinful. However, we cannot use drugs for entertainment purposes, which is sinful. Contrary to popular Christian theology, all things are lawful to us through responsible usage and moderation, though we must be ever mindful not to allow our usages to cause those with addiction issues to stumble in their recovery. I point this out because many believers have unintentionally allowed their minds to become enslaved by the traditional Christian beliefs of all that a born-again believer cannot do, as opposed to all of the things that we can do through the use of moderation and responsible behavior. Amusingly, this line of reasoning reminds me of the late great preacher Charles Spurgeon, who is still widely quoted today and whose books and sermons are still widely read. Oddly enough, few seem to know that Charles Spurgeon was a cigar smoker who averaged about one cigar a day, meaning that he was not addicted to them. Or in other words, in moderation, Charles Spurgeon could smoke cigars. However, he could not cross over the line into addiction, which is the sin of excessive smoking. All of which leads me to say that for two reasons, we must not label someone as a hypocrite just because they do not act like we believe they should. First, unbeknownst to us, many of our Christian beliefs are merely dogma, which have therefore created many religious-spirited Christians. Second, because the Apostle Paul had clearly stated that all things are lawful unto us, obviously meaning through the use of moderation and responsible behavior. However, crossing over the line into the extremes of drunken and or addictive behaviors is a hypocritical thing for a Christian to do.